welcome everyone to the presentation this morning, a presentation about cybersecurity. And that seems to be an issue that many people are concerned about. What I'll present today is a plan that will help you reduce the risk of a successful cybersecurity attack. And this presentation is not only for the big companies with big IT departments. Unfortunately, a lot of smaller businesses are getting targeted by cyber criminals. And the IT service companies that help small companies need to be aware of all the issues surrounding cybersecurity. I'll mention before we start that if you have any questions, could you put them in the chat box, please? And then we'll go through your questions at the end of the presentation. Valia will make available a copy of this slide deck plus a slide deck in Spanish at the end of the presentation. And the presentation will be recorded and put on the Flytec website in a few days, okay? So the presentation is going to deal with 4 issues: the business threats from cyber criminals, how can we go about protecting our businesses, what is a cyber protection plan. I'm going to talk about cyber security technology and then give a summary. And the introduction, I think, says it all. There's a comment from the World Economic Forum. Cybercrime is increasing. Unfortunately, ransomware is increasing faster than most other cyber crimes. And it's causing a huge financial impact on companies. The cyber criminals have no concern about the type of companies they attack. And in every case, the company that is attacked is going to suffer financial losses. So what are the business threats? Well, we have data theft threat. Could you mute your mic, please? Thank you. So we have data theft threats. Now, cyber criminals can sell information. For example, credit cards are a great target for data theft. The data theft can also be done by a competitor or an unfriendly nation looking for military or industrial secrets, and also the theft in order to publish the information and maybe damage the reputation of a business. Ransomware is extortion. It's a method of locking up the business data so the criminal can demand a ransom. In some cases, the criminal gets ransom and does not release the data. In some cases, the criminal gets the ransom and then sells the data. And there are segments which are targeted more than others. Healthcare is one, education is another. The cyber criminals look at segments where the loss of data is going to be critical to the business operation. But that doesn't prevent hackers attacking lawyers or insurance companies or accounting firms. So the types of cyber attacks, we have external threats, where the criminal is going to try and access the network via the ISP router. A lot of routers have known exploits or weaknesses that the criminal can take advantage of to get into the network. Also through remote access portals. If we have remote access into our network, that's a point where the criminals are going to look. If we have open ports in our router that we allow remote connections, then the criminals will take advantage of those ports. We have internal threats where the criminal is going to install software inside our network and use that software as a Trojan to be able to access our servers and our computer data. And I'll explain how that works in a few slides. And hackers also try to attack through devices which are network connected, and that can be a printer, for example, that has a maintenance port. That's a great way for a hacker to get access to the network. So there are a lot of different vulnerabilities in the business network. The methods that cyber criminals will use to attack, phishing is the most popular, and that means sending a message which impersonates a legitimate entity, and the message has a link, and when the link is clicked, it installs the Trojan virus on the computer. There is malware, where a website, a malicious website, opened downloads a virus. Another method is to send infected flash sticks to staff, which, using a name like Amazon, for example, the staff will plug into a computer and the flash stick installs the Trojan virus on the computer. Surprisingly, I'm told the flash stick works in about 40% of cases. So that's one method to be aware of. Credential theft is another. Social engineering, impersonating another member of staff to get usernames and passwords. And one point I think that is important is that even when staff are vigilant, cyber criminals are going to keep bombarding members of staff until someone makes a mistake and clicks on that link. And then once that happens, the criminal has access to the network. The method of entry with a Trojan virus is explained here. A phishing message is sent to many different employees of the company. The employee names and contact information is available on websites such as LinkedIn or even on the company website. And so the hacker will bombard members of staff until somebody clicks on a link. Then the Trojan virus is installed from the criminal's server. And the virus then works in the background on the user computer to request instructions. This means that the virus bypasses the firewall because it's making an outbound message. The criminal will respond with hacking commands, and eventually through a process get access to the servers, encrypt the information on those servers, and then display a ransom message on that computer. So that's basically the process of hacking using a Trojan virus, and a very popular method. Some facts about data breaches. Stolen login credentials are probably the #1 threat. And this is why it's important to look at multi-factor authentication, and we'll talk about that. Many of the breaches, 88%, are via a remote access method. A lot of companies install a firewall, but they don't install some protection mechanism for remote access, because there are ports open in the firewall to allow for remote access, and that's basically how the criminals get access. 85% of data breaches are discovered only after weeks or months, which means that the criminal is busy stealing data and no one knows that is happening. And any business that's attacked is going to suffer some type of serious financial consequence, maybe blackmail by the cyber criminals, demanding payments. It could be lawsuits from the owners of the stolen data, if this is an accounting firm, and reputational damage, loss of business, and possible even bankruptcy. So it can be a very serious matter. Some facts about ransomware. Well, the average ransomware demand is $500,000 to $1 million. Unfortunately, because the hackers have access to the data servers, they can often identify how much the company can afford to pay, and make sure their ransom demand is within that range. 30% of cases that the extortion is paid, the criminal does not release the data, and so there's no guarantee that the company is going to be able to carry on in business. So once the criminal has hacked a business, that criminal will share those vulnerabilities with other hackers, so that more attacks will follow. I mentioned the preferred ransomware targets: education, healthcare, small businesses that pay quickly, usually large businesses and banks invest in cybersecurity, and so they're much harder to hack. They require a lot more effort, and so the hacker will go for the quick and easy kill, as you might say. Ransomware theft is increasing exponentially. It's very easy for ransomware to be implemented. I ought to mention that education is such an easy target that the Florida have passed a law prohibiting school authorities to pay ransoms, and so if any ransom is paid, it's done illegally. Most of the ransomware criminals are located outside the USA in countries where there's no extradition treaty, and so they continue their efforts without fear of consequence. Today, criminals don't need a knowledge of programming because there are ransomware as a service businesses in foreign countries. This means that all you need to have is the desire to extort money from companies. You pay a ransomware as a service, they will place the ransomware, and it's up to you to demand the ransom. And they want a cut, they want a percentage. And it really is inevitable that businesses, both large and small, are going to be attacked by cyber criminals sooner or later. Whether that attack is successful is going to depend on the investments the business has made. But we have to remember, if we're in a business, we depend on computers and the internet to do business. And so we have to protect ourselves from the bad things that will happen once we're connected to the internet. Now, let me tell you about the cyber security business protection plan. We have three areas that we have to focus. The first one is training staff to recognize a potential attack. Staff are usually the entry point for the cyber criminal, and so we have to prepare them to understand how the criminals will attack and understand how they can identify that attack and understand what the consequences of an attack will be. And we should make this training frequent so that people continue to be familiar and be on guard. We need to prepare and test a recovery plan. If ransomware is placed on the server, then that's a little bit too late. So we either pay the ransom or we continue without the data, and neither of those are good options. So we should have a recovery plan prepared in order to continue working. Finally, technology products that block the criminal's entry into the network are very important. All networks need upgrading to a greater or lesser extent. All networks have vulnerabilities, and the only way to deal with this is to have cybersecurity experts look at the infrastructure and advise on how it can be upgraded to protect. And as I said, this is part of doing business. If a company operates because of the internet and because of computers, then the company has to also make that investment in cybersecurity infrastructure in order to protect itself from the bad things. Just as we would put a lock on the doors when we're in. If we have an office space, then we have to put a lock on the doors to keep the criminals out, and cybersecurity is no different. So training staff, I gave a little summary. We have a separate training course on this, so I can't go into details today due to a time limitation, but the basic points are this. We need to have staff understand what a cyber attack and what ransomware is, because a lot of people are not familiar with that. We need to explain the damage that a cyber attack can do to the business. It can possibly end the operation of the business. We need to explain the additional security procedures that we have to implement, explain the methods that cyber criminals will use to attack, list the precautions that staff have to follow, provide a cybersecurity awareness document. We want staff to report a possible attack so that our IT people can look at that very quickly. And we also want our staff to identify improvements that we can make in cybersecurity procedures, because staff see things that possibly management don't see. And so their feedback is essential. And we want to also reward staff for their participation in the cybersecurity process. And it's really no different from protecting a business physically. If people enter the business that are not authorized, then we want to have security to protect the business from those people. We want to prepare and test a ransomware attack recovery plan. How do we do this? Well, we have several steps. We have to, first of all, understand that we need the help of IT staff or an IT service provider to help with this recovery process. We want to write an attack recovery procedure and plan a budget for the cybersecurity investments. We want to keep daily or hourly business backups, and those backups want to be in off-site storage. We don't want those on the premises, because the hacker will try to encrypt backup before encrypting the main storage. We'd like to keep maybe 3 months of backups, because once the hackers are attacked, the most recent backups are going to be encrypted. And so we want to be able to go back in time to recover data that's not encrypted. We want to have multiple drives prepared to install on our servers, so that all we have to do is back up the data onto those drives. And we want to test the procedure periodically to make sure that people are familiar with the procedure. So when an attack works well, we disconnect the network from the internet, because the hacker is looking at what we're doing. Replace the server drives, restore data from the backups, and then we need to find the point of entry. So our IT people have to find exactly how the cyber criminal got in, because once we reconnect to the internet, if that port is open, the cyber criminal will try to attack again. So we need to be very careful about that. The importance of having off-site backups is noted at the bottom there, because, as I said, the cyber criminal will try to encrypt the backup to prevent you recovering. And so it must be a write-only process that the hacker cannot access. Cyber technology investments to protect the business. Well, I'm going to talk more about this today. The process of training staff and recovery plan are separate presentations. We have a more detailed presentation for the cyber technology investments, but I'm going to summarize it here today, as we're doing this in partnership with Flytec, and Flytec are a great cyber technology partner. They have a lot of knowledge about this. So what are the essential technology investments? Well, we want to make sure that we're updating software and firmware with security patches as soon as they're released, which means maybe having a weekly inspection by staff. We know that cyber criminals are going to exploit the weak points, either in operating systems or application software, but they also exploit the weak points in devices. Printers, routers, all have firmware, and those exploits are known. And if we don't keep updating devices with security patches, they become vulnerable to attack. We certainly want to have a firewall between our network and the internet. We want to install what is called endpoint security, which will allow us to manage all access to the network. We want to implement two-factor authentication, because that is one of the best methods of keeping the criminals out of the network. We want to use methods of remote access that will prevent hackers getting into the network, maybe using virtual private network connections and two-factor authentication. We want to make backups write-only, not online. We want to, where possible, move applications to the cloud. A lot of applications that businesses use are available in cloud versions, and they're more secure than having a server in our network. So applications like QuickBooks, for example, all have cloud versions. Some applications are only cloud, like Salesforce.net. And we want to have an inventory of our IoT devices because they may be vulnerable, especially devices that have some type of maintenance connection, which could be an air conditioning controller, might be a printer. We want to have an inventory of all those network connected devices. A lot of premises now have network connected air conditioner controllers. A lot of hotels have that. And so this saves them a lot of money because the computer systems can turn the AC off in rooms that are not occupied. But that's a vulnerability. That's a method of the hacker being able to get access to the network. It's worthwhile noting that firewall equipment must be configured by a cybersecurity expert. A firewall is only as good as the configuration that is made to the firewall. And so configuration is very important. Updating configuration, updating firmware with software patches, with security patches is also important. Okay. Endpoint security is essential, and large companies do this. Google or Microsoft, they all have endpoint security protection. And yet most small and medium businesses do not install endpoint security protection. And hackers know this, and they take advantage of that to hack into networks. The biggest deterrent is two-factor authentication with endpoint security. Usually if the cyber criminal sees that, the criminal will move on to the next victim. Zero trust. Well, this is basically endpoint security. Zero trust is the name that we use for this because we don't trust anything or anybody. If any device wants access to our network, then the identity has to be verified of both the device and the user before either is allowed to connect to the network. We want to limit access to the network resources, which may mean, for example, establishing IP ranges where that device can access in the network. We want to impose restrictions for internet access, because if people are using business computers, we don't want them to access personal emails because we know that's an attack vector. That's the method that cyber criminals will use. People can access personal emails on a mobile device. We also want to prevent users opening networks, websites which are identified as malicious. And there are services such as the umbrella service provided by Cisco that we add a subscription to our network, which blocks access to these types of networks. We want to monitor activity continually. We want to identify any potential threat, any attempt to access the network from an unauthorized source. So, as I said, the staff training recovery plan, that will be another presentation another day. There's a lot of information there, but I'll give you a summary of the technology plan. And we kind of boil this down to a 10-point network protection plan. We want to update staff computers, antivirus, the firewall, the endpoint security, two-factor authentication. We want to firewall any public internet service for guests, hotels, retail all have this. We want to make sure that remote access is done through a control channel, a VPN with authentication. We want backup made off-site. We want, where possible, applications moved to the cloud, monitoring network accesses and alerting any unauthorized access, and verify that IoT devices have no external links. And I'll go through these pages quite quickly. Antivirus, I think we're all familiar with that. That will be our first line of defense against the installation of a Trojan virus. It's not guaranteed to work every time because the criminals are constantly changing the virus profiles, but it's a good line of defense, and we make sure that it's updated on a daily basis. A firewall is extremely important. That's a path of attack, and we want to make sure that Our cyber criminal does not have access to the network through the internet. There are many firewall models that are available. Once again, they all rely on the skill of the IT staff to configure the device. Endpoint security. This is an area where the big companies are covered, but small and medium companies are not. What does endpoint security mean? Well, this is what we call the zero trust security appliance, which is a firewall. And any device which is going to connect to the network goes through that firewall. And it has various features. We're going to have a record of allowed devices. And so the device identity, the MAC address, has to be authenticated. We're going to have information about users who are allowed to access the network. So register a password. We'd like to have multi-factor authentication, at least two-factor authentication, whereby when a user logs in, that user receives a code on a mobile device and enters that code as part of the login process to authenticate that user. We want to set up filtering rules where we establish the IP range that user or device can access, not only in the local network, but also in the public network, in the internet, and filtering using one of the applications like Cisco to ensure that any attempt to open a malicious website is blocked. And we want to monitor for any type of activity which we don't expect. And we also want reporting. We want to be able to look at what's happening with our network, list authenticated users, list IP requests, list failed authentication, and also alerting. Now, a lot of smaller businesses, medium-sized businesses don't have an IT department, but they do have an IT service provider. And so the IT service provider has to be aware that this type of protection can be provided, and also provide a service to monitor the network to protect the customer. Two-factor authentication. Well, usually employees hate it because it's one extra step, one extra thing to remember. But honestly, it's not the employees who are going to pay the cost if the company gets hacked. It's the company owner. And so it's essential for company owners, business managers to implement two-factor authentication at least. There's a comment there by Microsoft's VP of Identity Security. 99.9% of user accounts that have compromised don't have multi-factor authentication. And he says that that is one of the most basic defenses against identity attacks. One comment I would make, and this is once again a different presentation. If a company is seeking cybersecurity insurance, then insurers are going to insist that the network has MFA protection. It's the same if you're looking for insurance for your building. The insurers are going to check that you have an alarm to advise, set off an alarm if access occurs. Same if you want fire insurance. The insurer is going to check your premises to make sure you have a fire alarm system that is working and tested, and also check that you have fire extinguishers. So the insurance companies will follow the same procedure. If a business is seeking cybersecurity insurance, insurers are going to insist on certain types of cybersecurity protections, because if they risk paying out money, then they are going to operate at a loss. So they're going to make sure that their customers are protecting their businesses as much as possible. So two-factor authentication, a definite must for small and medium businesses, not just for large businesses and banks. Okay. Public Wi-Fi. A lot of businesses provide internet for the public. Hospitality businesses, retail businesses, It can be small retail, it can be a hair salon, it can be a large big box store. They all provide internet. It can be a dental waiting office. So that Wi-Fi will give access to the network if it's not firewalled. And the company may think, well, it's only applicable to people who are sitting in my waiting room or in my premises that have access to the Wi-Fi. That's not true, because any device can be compromised with a Trojan virus. And so once that device is brought into that office space and connects to the network, then that alerts the hacker that there is work to be done. There's a network to be hacked. And so it's possible that that hacker, once has access to the network, can plant a virus on a computer inside the network and continue hacking. So the person visiting the company is a transport for a hacking method inside that company. And all businesses that provide public Wi-Fi must have a firewall, and that provides a series of protections. It's essential for businesses, for example, that have a point of sale. They have to comply with PCI DSS, the Payment Card Industry Data Security Standard. That specifies that either public Wi-Fi is connected to a separate ISP, or else it's connected to the network via a firewall. It applies to healthcare because they need to comply with the HIPAA security rule. And the HIPAA security rule requires two-factor authentication to log into a network. Remote access. Well, when we set up remote access, we have to be very, very careful, because this is a method that the hacker is going to try to access the network. We're going to have to open a port in the firewall, and then that port will connect to a VPN server, maybe in the same router. Once that VPN connection is connected to a VPN server, well, we know that that is part of the authentication process. However, we want to ensure that the user operating the device is who that user says he or she is. And so we're going to want to apply two-factor authentication to that user, so that if a credential is stolen, username and password is stolen, which is one of the targets of hackers, then they still need to go through the step of two-factor authentication in order to access the network. So stealing a password is not the answer to hacking into the network. So that's a very important step. Once again, we're applying zero trust to a remote access. We do not trust until we authenticate the user and device trying to access the network. Offsite data backup. I mentioned this. We want to make sure that the backup is not accessible from the business network. We set up a batch file on the server, which sends the data periodically through a VPN connection to an offsite backup storage, which stores the information sequentially. So if the hacker does encrypt the database, well, we're going to have encrypted backups, but there will be backups before a certain time available that are not encrypted. And so those are the ones we need to use to recover our network with. Move applications and data to the cloud if we can. If the applications are sourced from a company like Microsoft, they actively encourage users. Oracle do too. They have cloud services, and they want to sell those cloud services to customers. Now they spend a lot of time and effort making those cloud services secure, and so it's a good move. It may cost a little more in the long run, but it protects the business data. So very important that businesses consider that. If a business has proprietary software that was developed for that business, it's still possible to move it to the cloud. But for example, clouds like AWS and Azure are available. Probably the business will need to call in a consulting firm with the expertise of transporting an application to the cloud. But it's a very good investment that a business can make to protect the application and data. We want to monitor network access. We can do this with our endpoint security device because that's logging information all the time about devices and users who are connecting to the network. It's also logging information about attempted accesses, either from a device that is not supposed to be connecting to the network, or someone who's trying to use a device that is not authorized to connect to the network. We want to know about this because if we see the potential for an attack, we want to take evasive action immediately. IoT devices, I've mentioned these. It can be an air conditioning system, it can be a printer, it can be a production machine. A metalworking company, for example, will have a laser cutter that has a maintenance connection to the manufacturer. That's a point of attack. So we have to look at all those devices that are connected to our network and make an assessment on the security of those devices. So, summary of cyber attack risks. All businesses are at risk, no exceptions. Okay. Unfortunately, because the larger businesses usually spend more on cyber security, they're better protected, and so the criminals are targeting small and medium companies. Even a small company, a law firm, an accounting firm, maybe they can be squeezed for $500,000. So that will damage the business quite seriously. But nevertheless, that's what the hackers are targeting. And the business can suffer many types of losses. The cost of the ransom, additional cost of recovering the business if the data is not released, reputational cost, loss of customer trust. The business data ends up being sold on the dark web is a serious problem. Healthcare businesses, they are at the biggest risk because they have a legal obligation to report a data breach to the Department of Health and Human Services, and then they have to pay a fine according to the number of patient records breached. That's part of the HIPAA security rule. And so the healthcare businesses get hit twice after a ransomware attack or a data breach. So the essential cybersecurity checklist. Well, vigilance is the number one there. We want to be aware of who is using the network and what is being accessed. So we want to install a firewall, tools to monitor network use. We want a security expert to make regular checkups, ensure that software patches are always installed. And we want to allow only approved devices and people to access the network. We want to implement two-factor authentication. And we prefer that computers that are connected to the network are not disconnected and moved elsewhere. Because once a device is moved to another network, then there is a risk that computer will become infected. If staff are working remotely, it's better to give them two computers, one which permanently stays in the office and one, probably a laptop, which they can take to customers or use at home. And then data can be shared through cloud storage, where the data can be scanned for viruses. So those are the precautions that we should be taking. There are new technologies becoming available. One of them is artificial intelligence, assessment of unusual activity. These, although the prices are already quite high, these types of technology are being implemented by the bigger firms. Google has it, Microsoft has it. What does this mean? It means that the AI is building a database, or you might say training a neural network with the information about the devices that are connecting to the network. And so it looks for unusual activity and flags that unusual activity, and that may result in that device being disconnected from the network or at least investigated. Unusual activity might occur when a Trojan virus is installed on the computer. And so the hacker starts accessing servers that are not normally accessed by that user. And so that is the type of unusual activity. So AI is, unfortunately, the cost is not within reach of small to medium businesses yet, but it very soon will be. And so that's the technology that we have to consider. So the network endpoint is the weakest link. That is the preferred target of cyber criminals. The network endpoint, remember, is the point where devices connect to the network. And so there are several different products that are available. One excellent product is called Fortinet, which is a product from Fortinet. Now, that is used by banks and businesses. It's a 40,000 plus product, but it does a great job. There are much more economical products like the Ethernet that do a great job of protecting the endpoints of the network. We want to make sure that who is getting access and what devices have access, devices and people that we have authorized to have. Flytec, I should mention, has a wide range of products. Firewall products like WatchGuard, which are very popular. Router products like MIEEE have firewalls. They require technical knowledge for programming. Of course, they have to be scripted. So they're harder to implement, but with the right expertise, can be very effective at a price point. We have endpoint security products like Ethernet, which implement zero trust security. And then we have public internet firewall products like Guest Internet that do a great job, very popular with motels, hotels, retail, do a great job with protecting the business network from hackers that have features such as firewalls and other types of controls. Finally, a quick mention about Internet Technology Answers. We have a range of cybersecurity services, business infrastructure, cybersecurity risk assessment, review of cybersecurity policies. Many companies don't have policies in place. We help to draft new policies. Evaluation of cybersecurity technology controls, preparation of a technology transition plan to move from where the network is now to a point where the network is better protected, analysis of risk management and recovery procedures, preparation of a cyber attack recovery plan, periodic employee training for awareness. This is also a great way to minimize the impact of a cyber criminal on your network. And then compliance with PCI DSS and the HIPAA security rule for healthcare companies. Okay, and we work with a company's IT department or IT service company to protect the company. Well, thank you for your participation. That's all I want to say today. As I said, there are many other avenues that we provide presentations and training for. So we've basically scratched the surface, but I think it will give you a pretty good idea of where cybersecurity needs to go inside your company, or if you're an IT service firm, what type of services you can offer to your customers to better protect them. If you have any questions, let's look at the message board. I'll ask Valia if she can help me with this. To take a look at the message board and identify any questions that people might have. So if you could take a look at the message board for me, please, Valia, and tell me if we have any questions from people who are online.
I'm checking, Jan. Allow me 1 second.
Okay, thank you for your help.
There are no questions so far.
Okay, well, in that case, we'll finish here. As I mentioned at the beginning, the slide deck is going to be available in English and in Spanish to people who want to download it. I know Flytec will make available a recording of this presentation, and so you'll be able to download that recording also. And if anyone does have any questions, well, my contact information is up there on the screen. You can also contact the people in Flytec with any questions that you have. So I'd be glad to answer any questions. So I thank you very
John,
much for
there are some questions
joining
on
the
the
call.
board.
Go ahead.
There are some questions.
Jim
is asking,
go ahead.
second factor on 2FA is always to a phone. Can it be to an email?
Just repeat that. 2FA. Oh yeah, I understand. Yeah, 2FA can be any method. It really depends on how that's implemented. But yes, you can send a message via SMS. You can send it via email, and those are the two popular options. So that if you obviously you work with companies like Amazon or other retail companies, you'll see that each one has a preferred method. Some will send the access code by email and some by phone. So that depends on the equipment that you're installing, the endpoint security equipment. Okay, any more?
There's another questions. Diana is asking how to prevent carding.
Card, you mean access control cards?
Like the credit card.
Oh, credit card. Well, that's a method that the credit card companies they have their own methods. Each one implements its own method for credit card verification, and basically we have no control over that. If we're using an entity to charge credit cards that can be authorized.net, they're going to manage the authentication process and identify any misuse of credit cards. So we have to rely on the service of a third party to tell us if there's any attempt at credit card theft or that type of thing. All right. Well, thank you very much indeed. I appreciate your time. I ran a little bit over time, but I hope you enjoyed the presentation.